Welcome, everyone, to Sault Sports. My name's Tony Boniferro, joined alongside Jim Monico and Peter Ruicci. This is a pretty awesome experience for me. Peter is almost like an otherly world figure to me growing up, and still kind of is, right? The amount of pride and joy, Peter, that you've given so many young athletes in Sault Ste. Marie is legendary. I remember after games on Friday nights, we'd be at parties, and everything would stop to watch MCTV News, right, to see what Peter Ruicci had to say, and you know what, and the highlights of the game. Every Friday, Saturday, the paper didn't come out on Sundays, or Monday morning, we would all race to the store in high school, right, just in the mornings, and grab the paper before we would go to school just to read your articles, to see what you had to say about us and see if you talked about us. So we're really honored to have you here with us today, Peter. You've had a legendary career here in the Sioux, and thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what to say after that. The one thing I would say is you shouldn't have been at a party on a Friday night breaking curfew after a game. That's one thing.
It's so true. Yeah. So
no, I had no idea you guys would race to get the newspaper, man. Oh man.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But that's pretty. I don't know. That's something I would do.
Yeah.
Too, so I guess I could see it. I used to race to get the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News at the old Hub Cigar Store when I was young, because there was no internet, and you got all the lowdown on all my favorite teams playing Detroit. So yeah. I did that too.
I was the same, Peter. I grew up at the Hub Cigar Store. I'd go with my dad all the time, and we'd always be there for an hour every
except you're
Sunday
not a Tigers fan or a Lions fan.
Yeah.
So
but you love sports. I know that, Jimmy.
Oh yeah.
Tony too.
So just hearing that though. Just hearing that though, Peter. So just hearing that, do you fully, now that you're retired, now that you've kind of had a chance to step away, do you fully understand the impact that you had in this community, and do you fully understand the impact of your articles and kind of what they did to people, and kind of the motivation and the self-confidence they gave people growing up? Have you heard a lot of this throughout your time?
A little bit, not as much as what you said today. I didn't realize people would you guys would race to the TV to watch the late sports. Maybe because, you know what, there was no internet back then.
That's right.
So, I mean, we kind of, when we did the sports on TV, if you missed that, like if I was off that night and I missed the sports on TV and I didn't know some of the scores, I mean, you were in trouble. So, yeah, I guess. But hey, believe me, it's wonderful to hear. I didn't know that you guys would race to get the paper and want to watch the late sports, but that's very nice.
We would get to school early, and we would all sit in the cafeteria, and one of us would grab the Sioux Star, and we would sit in there, and we would read your article every morning, like after a football game or a basketball game. And I think that's something that a lot of people did.
That's one thing I miss, Peter. Things change, and I know Bono's going to talk about this, and things change, and I'm not sure that they're always for the better. The local sports on TV was awesome. For me, I'm in my early 50s now. I grew up like that. You'd come home, you'd watch the Greyhound highlights. They were great to see. If the Greyhounds made a trade, you'd hear it on the news. Like Bono said, the local high school scene and the previews of the games and all that stuff. And things change, and most of the time they're for the better. But don't think that's one thing that's changed for the better. I really miss the local sports and that scene. And I'm talking more about TV, but I really miss that.
You know what? It's really disappointing what they've done with what MCTV out of Sudbury has done with local television. I mean, geez, I did it for almost 20 years from the time I think I got hired full time. I was like 20, maybe. I was still going to Lake Superior State, but I had started before that, or 21. I think I started full time, and I was still a student at Lake Superior State. But I can remember us running high school football highlights, interviews with players and coaches after the game, Greyhound highlights. When the Thunderbirds were in the old International Junior B, we'd interview Abby Caricato or some of the players. All high school sports, like girls basketball, boys basketball, football. I mean, track and field. And minor hockey. I mean, the midget hockey was so good in the Sioux back then. With Sioux Legion, we had some powerhouse teams in the Sioux. Yeah, it's really sad because now I mean, they don't even cover the OHL. Imagine the local television station does not do anything on the Ontario Hockey League. Like that to me is.
It's just, Peter, I don't even put it on anymore. I don't even put the local news on anymore because it's just not worth it for me. I would always change it to it at 11:40. Not anymore.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
It is a shame.
So Peter, kind of growing up, you talked a little bit about this in your retirement article. You kind of always wanted to be a sports broadcaster, right, or a sports writer, right? I know we all kind of have that, that dream down the road, but a lot of people have that dream and want to do that, but don't actually, follow through and complete it. Kind of talk about how you actually became a sports writer, and was this something that you were always kind of geared towards?
Well, I knew I either wanted to be a sports writer or a sports broadcaster. And I always say I was tremendously lucky because, like you said, there's a ton of guys like us, the three of us, who love sports so much that would love to make that a career. And I just, I got lucky. I don't know how else to put it. I had an uncle. He's no longer with us, Albert Greco. He happened to run into Randy Russin, who was working for CKCY Radio. And he said on the street, in the Queen Street, I think it was on Queen Street, and he just happened to say to him, I've got a nephew who would like to work in radio. Are you guys looking for a part-time person? I was going to Sir James Dunn then. And Russin said yes. And so I started reading the weekend sports. I'd go there at like 10 in the morning. You'd clear the wire, like all the news came in on a teletype machine. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Would come in like a typewriter, tick 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 tick, and paper would come down with the stories written on all the baseball games and football and the OHL and everything, hockey games, the NHL summaries would come in, and you'd clear the wire, you'd rip the paper off. And you'd go into, your office, or they had an area where everyone worked, and you'd start putting things together. Like okay, I'm going to start with the NHL games because Gretzky was or maybe Gretzky was in the WHA then. I can't remember. But you know what I mean? If some big guy like that scored 4 goals the night before, that would be your lead story. Or if the Greyhounds played, that would be your top story. Or if it was high school football, that would be the city final. That would be your top story. And so you construct your cast, and you'd type stories up using the wire copy, the teletype paper. And I'm trying to think when we went on. I'd go in there at like 10:30 in the morning, and I think we were on at 20 to 1, and we'd do a 20-minute radio sportscast. We'd have clips with Greyhound guys, interview clips with guys from high school football or the Steelers, or, what was going on locally then, basketball, maybe Nassau or local curling. And you'd have interview clips with guys, have stories, and you'd go on for 20 minutes. So I started doing that. And then there was an opening at the TV station, and I started doing the TV, and I was 19. I was reading the sports, filling in like as a guy on the weekends and maybe a couple times during the week, during the late night. The supper time cast was always your big sports cast. And I looked like I was 14. I remember somebody saying it looked like your mother put a suit on you and packed a lunch for you and sent you off to the TV station, because I didn't look 19, and really I looked like I was 14, some little kid on TV reading sports. And I said when I retired in the column I wrote, like, who gets an opportunity like that? Like, it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, who would have put, except for the late 1970s, who would put a kid on television, really? Yeah. And in a city, a medium-sized market, the Sioux is considered. I mean, it's like pure luck. And you're crummy when you start. You're nervous as hell. the lights are bright. They're trying to make you laugh from behind the camera because, you know, the guys will go behind the camera and moon you or stick their fingers up their nose or something to try to get you to laugh because they think it'd be funny to see you screw up on live television. Yeah. So you're a nervous wreck. You know, people, you know, in the studio, there might only be 3 or 4 people, but you know, there's people out there at home watching. And you're nervous as hell. But eventually you stop making as many mistakes. You make a ton of mistakes at the start, and the more confident, like the more comfortable you get, it becomes easier. And so you end up through attrition, you get hired full time after. Then I finished at Lake State, and I worked a couple of years while I was going to school at Lake State. So I'd go to school during the daytime, come back, put everything together for the supper time sports. And we used to get 20 minutes. We'd get 20 minutes on television from like 20 to 7 till 6:58, till 2 minutes to 7. And I'd get highlights from almost every NHL game, from football. Like Mondays, we'd have highlights from every NFL game. It took a lot of work. Like you'd have to go to the highlight package and take off the pieces you wanted. You know, Joe Blow throws a touchdown pass. Okay, there's the highlight from that game. And you'd edit them all together, and then you'd voice them you'd tape your voice on them with some music or some cheering background. So it took a lot of time, but 20 minutes, and we'd interview tons of local athletes. Like,
that's great.
Times have changed. Yeah. Even in the newspaper racket, the last few years in the newspaper racket, I mean, we used to get, there was a time when Alex Mitchell, there was me, Alex Mitchell, Bill Montague, and Danny Belrose. And we had a whole section, the C section of the newspaper was all sports. We'd have the first 4 pages full sports. And a lot of it was local, like Greyhound story and Greyhound picture, a column maybe about what the Greyhounds were up to or whether they might make a trade. High school football feature story, a picture of guys at practice getting ready for that week's games. Now, before I left the paper, when I retired, all you had was the front page, and the second page would be national, and that's it. And it's just you have deadlines now. We didn't have deadlines. Like if something happened locally, and it didn't happen till midnight or 12:30 at night, or a late game on the West Coast or something, it would be in the paper. Now you've got to have your sports stuff in by 10:30 at night. So you'll notice sometimes, for instance, before I retired, Jimmy, you can attest to this. I would send you an email the day before and say, "Hey, I got a Greyhound game Friday night. Can you email me the score from your high school football game on Friday? Whoever scored the touchdowns and a couple of quotes on how you thought your team played." And say you were playing Seth Condor or one of the other guys or Tommy Annett. I'd email Tommy. Tommy, send me the names of the guys that scored the touchdowns and some comments on the game. And I'd be down at the rink at the Greyhound game before 10:30. I'd have to have my Greyhound story written, but I'd also want to do a story on high school football, but it wouldn't be the kind of story that we're all used to, a long story with a picture. It would just be what we call like 10 inches. A column inches is 30 words. It'd be 300 words. And that would be it. And that had to suffice. And I'll be honest, that always bothered me. It's short shrifting, or I can remember covering high school girls basketball, city finals on a Friday night. The Hounds would be on the road. I'd have my iPod with me so I could listen to the Greyhound game on the road. I'd watch the girls basketball, listen to the Hound game on the road, come back, watch Greyhound highlights so I could get a better feel of what was going on, come back after interviewing kids, my picture together for the girls basketball or the boys basketball final, bang off a quick story there, call Drew Bannister or John Dean or whoever was a coach at that time, or Sheldon Keefe, and get his comments, talk to one player maybe, and bang out a quick Greyhound story. By 20 to 11, everything was done, but it's because we had a deadline. We had to get our stuff in to get it to North Bay, and or to get it to Barrie. Barrie would paginate the pages, and then it would be sent to North Bay. It would get printed in North Bay, and then put on the trucks at 2, 3 in the morning, and come up to the Sioux in time to be here in the morning. But I'll be honest, and it bothered me that there should be a reporter at both of those things that could dedicate himself to just doing a good job on that, instead of doing a half-assed job covering 2 or 3 things at once, because there'd be the Thunderbirds might be playing that night too. So you'd go on their website and get the information on how they were doing and type up something fast on that just to get it all in the paper. And it was, it's stressful. You make mistakes that way because you're in a rush. And times have changed, though. I mean, not as many people subscribe to the newspaper, and so they earners to keep profits up, and they go to a system where things are done by all the papers in the news chain. And I mean, that bothered me, and I'm sure guys like you guys who follow a lot of low sports, it bothers you too.
I think the opposite. Yeah. I think the opposite, though, Peter. Like from my personal perspective of you, I think that people appreciated the effort that you put in to make sure that everyone still got covered, because I'm not sure everybody would do that, because I know, like, my time with the SaberCats, all of us coaches always appreciated the fact that you kind of went out of your way to make sure that the SaberCats, and more so for the kids themselves, that they got coverage. And we always appreciated that, because, I mean, like, Sioux Star has Gord now. I think Gord does a good job. I hope he does the same thing and goes out of his way to cover everything too. It's tough though, it's work, and you know that better than anybody.
You're breaking up a little on me, but I can hear most of what you said. You know what? I guess I was old school. Like, when I started, you tried to make sure everything was complete, and like I said, it bothered me. My wife would tell you, and some of my buddies would tell you, it bothered me when things were cut back, that a lot of sports didn't get as much as they used to. And the thing with the SaberCats and the Steelers was, it's a little quieter because there's no Greyhounds and there's no high school sports, except, you'd have like the city track and field, and then NASA and OFSA for track and field. But after that, it was it for, and also high school soccer would have been about that time of the year. But when you got into the main part of the summer, there was golf, the golf tournaments, SaberCats, Steelers, Hounds would always make there'd always be Greyhound news with somebody leaving or a new coach coming. But there was more time to give to local football. And to me, and I mean, I love baseball. The biggest 2 sports in this city are hockey and football. I mean, this city has been, I think, like, very, very impressive in the success it's had in football over the years. Like, our high school teams, SaberCats are always competitive. Steelers have won Canadian championships. It's and I think the interest right after hockey, it's football is the number 2 sport here.
So, Peter, what I wanted to ask you about was, growing up, obviously, again, you were always the big deal, right? And I don't even know if you realize that, but you were.
You're breaking up on me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just a sec, because we're just going to pause this for a sec. I don't know, because again, we can splice this. I don't know if it's your internet or if it's your phone, but it seems, like, I can hear you perfectly. You're coming through, but you can hear a little bit of choppiness.
Yeah, there's some crackling.
Can you sign out and then sign back in on the same link? Sometimes that helps.
Sign out and then sign back in?
Yeah. Just kind of close it and then click back on the link, and I'll let you back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, that's good, Jim, because he just talks. You let him talk like that.
Ask your questions, though, Bono, because I'll talk too. You know how I am.
Yeah, I know. Well,
get your questions in there.
He covered most of it. I'm going to ask him about the TSN thing right now.
Yeah, that's a fun story.
Crackling when we did it.
Hey, how's that?
He's gone again.
I don't know if it's because he's on his phone or what it is, but
I can hear him clear, but you're right. There's a little bit of crackling.
I can hear him clear too. Yeah.
But he can't hear us.
Yeah. There. How's that?
Yeah, the crackling's gone. Hold on.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Sometimes
it's not your fault.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna get back in here. So Peter, thanks so much. So again, like kind of growing up, we often heard a lot of rumors. We heard a lot of stories, right? So I've always wanted to ask you this, and I'm actually excited to actually get a chance to ask you this. There were lots of rumors about you having the opportunity to go work for TSN. That's all I've heard is that you had an opportunity to go work for TSN. Can you kind of talk about that, and if that is true, did they offer you a job? Kind of, how did that work?
Yeah, it would have been. I got to think about this because my mother had just gotten sick then, and my mother passed in 80. It would have been 1984. I remember because my mother had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. Yeah, I had sent tapes to Windsor because they were looking for somebody at. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't even think of the station in Windsor then. It's probably closed now the way TV is going. But yeah, the guy I applied to a job for, his name was Peter Allies. He was the news director. And they ended up, the guy didn't leave, so there wasn't an opening. But about a year later, he gets a job as the first news director at TSN when TSN's going on the air. So my friend Steve Cooney used to work for CBC Television way back when in the 70s. And he was a radio guy actually at CKCY way before my time. I was a kid then. But he was going to go and work for them. So I assume he put in a good word for me. I'd met him years before this. Peter Allies called me and said, how'd you like to come and work? We're going to hire 6 guys to start this new sports network. And they hired Gino Retta and Mike Landsberg. And, I'm trying to think of the other people. It was young guys. I think probably everybody else is gone. I think Gino Retta might be the last of the. Not Detition. No, Detition came in later. But anyway, they ended up hiring 6 guys. And for me, my mother had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, and I really didn't want to leave. Like it was time anybody in my life. I would have been. I don't know, 25 years old. First time anybody in my life had ever been sick, and I knew it was serious because it was advanced. And I just told him, I appreciate it, thanks, but no thanks. But looking back, it was probably the right thing because the way TV is now, Gino Retta, who was one of their. Who else was in that group? Rod Smith.
Okay. Yeah.
Rod Smith, Gino Retta, Mike Landsberg. I'm trying to think of the other guys. But the way things are now, and have been for years, it's all young people anchoring.
Yeah.
Like guy like Gino Retta, they give him That's Hockey, and some of the other people who've been around, they host the curling or something. Like you wouldn't be a sportscaster. It's all the young people. I guess the demographics show them that nobody wants to watch an older guy doing sports, and you've got a lot of women in it. And back then it was, I'm thinking maybe TSN had one female anchor.
Yeah. And
this was before Sportsnet as well, so it probably worked out for the best. I was, things didn't work out for me here in television because the television was going to scale back, to a great degree. And I mean, who thought it would get to the point that it's at now? But I was able there again, able to latch onto a job at the newspaper, and I got, unlike a lot of my colleagues who didn't get a choice when they were out of the media, they're just bang, you're out of the media. I managed to survive 40 some years with only one change, but I was out. I got a nice payout from the TV station when they got rid of a whack of us because we were all managers. They got rid of must have been 20 guys they got rid of when MCTV got rolling. but I was able to keep a job, and here I am now. I was able to retire comfortably, and I got to work. The newspaper racket was like TV was a blast. Live television is so much fun. Like when that light goes on, you get an adrenaline rush. If you like that kind of stuff, it was a blast. Newspaper was different. I found it. I realized once I got into newspaper, it's much more in depth. High school football, we'd come on and give the guys who scored the touchdown, and okay, let's roll the highlights, and that was it. But newspaper, you gave a description of so many aspects of the game. You got so much deeper, and newspaper does that in all stories. TV is kind of like just the headline and the basics, but so newspaper, you might interview both coaches and two kids on the winning team, say, for whatever sport, basketball, girls volleyball, whatever. But TV was just so much, it wasn't as in depth, so I got to experience that part of it too. And you know what? I found that was a lot of fun too. Not as much fun as TV. TV was a blast.
The one thing, Peter, that I always
was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the one thing, Peter, that I think not necessarily was underrated about you, but when you would start your articles, right, you always had a way of coming up with, you would use just unbelievable analogies in your articles, or, the way that you would come out with things and kind of grab the reader's attention. How much time and effort did you actually put into coming up with titles, or did that just naturally come to you? Was that just a natural gift that you had?
No, you got to think about it sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, and you'll just, I was always taught a newspaper, and I had great guys to teach me a newspaper. When I joined the newspaper, there was Alex Mitchell, Bill Montague, and Dan Belrose. And those guys were old-time newspaper guys, like dyed-in-the-wool reporters. Like they didn't, and the first thing that you learn is the lead of your story, your first sentence, to grab the reader's attention.
Yeah.
So that's what everybody worked on, trying to come up with something catchy that, would make the reader say, oh, I want to read this story. So that's pretty much, a lot of times if you go in, there's, I shouldn't say if you go into a newsroom these days. If you go into a newsroom these days, you're there's you, the desk, and one other person maybe. In the old days, when you go into a newsroom and it was 10 or 11 o'clock at night and everybody's writing their stories, that's the one thing the news guys and the sports guys would be doing, sitting around like this thinking, I got to come up with a good lead.
Yeah.
It's I think you say that because that's, guys would say, hey, what do you think of this? Or in the news department, we hear them from sport next to them. We'd hear them talking about, how do I make this, does this sound catchy to you? And that was one of the, sometimes that'll hold you up, or that held you up for like 45 minutes. You're ready to write the story. I can't come up. And there was a guy at the Sioux Star before me in the newsroom who used to always say, and it got passed down, his advice, write what you can, write the rest of the story, and you'll think of the lead, at some point, and add the lead. Otherwise, it's like when you do an exam in high school, do the easy questions first.
Yeah.
So this guy used to say, write your story, and eventually you'll come up with the lead to it. But I just tried to come up with something that I thought.
It's funny, Peter. I hope you can hear me good.
Yeah.
What's funny, I hope you can hear me, is we always kind of laugh, and it's funny for you to hear what we think of you. When you call us, especially in the SaberCast days, you kind of had the story kind of pre-written a little bit in your mind, and to us, you would kind of let us into the story with your questions. I always found that, and I like that. And you kind of had an idea what you wanted to say already, and you'd ask me questions that kind of led to back up your story, and we always like that. And you know what I mean by that?
Did you? Yeah. You're saying you guys like that?
Yeah, we liked it because you had an idea already what you wanted to hear from us, and you kind of led us into those answers. In a way, we like that.
Yeah, you're right. There's no doubt about it. reporters, because they'll think, okay, the key to this game was the way they came out to start. So then when you're talking to the coach or something, that's what you'll ask them about. You'll ask them 3 or 4 questions. What did you say at halftime? Which guys, did the kids say anything to each other in the dressing room? Yeah, you're right. You have an idea of what you think is the way the game went. But a lot of times, you'll change that depending on the coach might tell you, our clock was hurt or something, and he gutted it out, and that's what the other kids followed him, and then your whole basis to which way your story's going changes because you learned something from the coach as to exactly what he thought happened.
Yeah. What I always found cool, Peter, was you've interviewed me a few times, and you would always have your notepad in front of you.
I would,
and you
what?
Oh, sorry. You would always have your notepad whenever you would interview us.
Oh, right.
Is it cutting out? Yeah. So you'd always have your notepad, and you would write something, and I would just see you do circles, and then I would kind of look over your shoulder, and I'd be like, what did he write down? And it was almost like you would write down 1 or 2 little words, right, which was important to the article, and you always made sure that you quoted the coaches accurately. Is that something that you have, kind of take pride in a lot, is kind of carrying over what coaches and players tell you to give the fans that same experience and that same, interaction?
You know what, Tony? We're breaking up, but I think
okay.
What you're saying.
Yeah, Jay. Sorry, just a sec, Jay. It's breaking up here again. I'm not sure why. I'm just writing this down. It's tough to hear him. We're getting all choppy with him and stuff. I'm not sure if it's on his end or if it's on ours.
Wait 1 second. I gotta go here for a second. I'll try to come back. Okay.
Yeah.
You're good.
So what I was asking, Peter, was when you're interviewing, when you used to interview a player or a coach, did you take a lot of pride in kind of trying to almost pass on the message that the coach and player are trying to give to the media, to the public? Because I feel like you did an amazing job of, almost bringing light into the story, right? And really giving the coach's side of the story or the player's side of the story with just a few little words. You were able to feel what the coach was saying. And I think that had a lot to do with your writing style.
Well, I mean, that's what I was always taught. That's what we should do. I mean, if you're writing a game story like a grade or high school football or high school basketball or something, I mean, your opinion seeps into the story a little bit, but it's not an opinion piece. It's supposed to be factual. So what the coach says and what other people say, I mean, that's what the people you're interviewing say. That's critical to the story. I was always trained that way. And like I said, when I started newspaper, I knew nothing about it. I had come from television, and I learned from watching and listening to Alex Mitchell and Bill and Dan Belrose and Bill Montague. And that's the way I had those guys were by the book. They believed in journalism. They really did. Mm-hmm. And they were the ones that I learned how to do things from watching them.
That's great. Peter, I know I said I'd only keep you for about 30 minutes, and we're already going on to 40. No, that's
okay. You know what? I never get to talk about this stuff. So
this is great. Fun. So yeah. So since you're not kicking us off too quick here, I want to ask you about a couple specific things, if that's okay. I'd like to talk to you briefly about the Greyhounds. You, I don't want to say the Greyhounds has kind of, helped your career in a sense, or you've helped the Greyhounds, but it's kind of been a mutually beneficial thing, and I really think that you bring a lot to the broadcast. You bring a lot to the organization with what you with your articles and just the way that you describe the game. How did you originally become so involved with them? Was it just through covering them daily, or every week during the season? Is that how you became more involved with them?
What do you mean, like doing the radio?
Doing the radio stuff, yeah.
When Jerry started as the play-by-play guy, the owner of the station in Sault, Michigan, Bill Gleach, called me up. Jerry needed somebody because people don't realize how hard it is when he's on the road for one person to carry a broadcast. Like, it's difficult. I mean, there's so many other things besides the describing of the game. There's keeping track of commercials and having the lineups. And I mean, you're doing a million things when you're a broadcaster doing play-by-play. I saw it on a small, I used to do the Sioux Steeler games on radio, but on a smaller scale. So Bill Gleach called me up and said, would you go on between periods? Because it's hard, it's good to have somebody. This is about, I'm trying to think. Nick Cousins and Catanacci were rookies. So it would have been around 2010, maybe, something like that. Anyway, so he goes, would you go on between periods with them and, shoot the breeze about the game? And I was there anyway. I said, yeah, I've done radio. I used to do a morning radio comment for his station at Yes FM. I do a morning comment for like a minute and a half every morning with on the morning show. So I said, yeah, I miss doing live radio because I wasn't doing that commentary anymore, and I was with the newspaper, so I wasn't working radio TV for CKCY radio. So I just started going on, and then when I retired, I didn't want to retire like just cold, like stop doing everything, and I was still gonna do the radio because I enjoy working with Jerry and Spanky. They're really good guys, and you know what? It's live radio is fun, almost as much fun as live TV. Yeah. And so I knew I was going to still do the radio after I retired, and I talked to the Hounds, and Tim Lukenda said, well, if you wanted to do pre-game stories and game stories, that would be great. But would you also do 50th anniversary? Would you do 50th anniversary stories? Call up guys that played here. We've talked to, I'm trying to think of some of the guys we've talked to lately. Andrew Campbell with the Greyhounds, and Andrew Desjardins, and I've got one with Wayne Gruel going up today. Graham Bonner. Guys, some of these guys are before your time. They're from 1980, but you know what? To celebrate their 50th anniversary, talk to these guys and find out, find out some funny stories, what their take was on winning the OHL championship if they played for a championship team. So I just started doing that. This way, it's perfect for me. That's great. a story before the game, go to the game, do a story after the game, and once they get out of this 50th anniversary by next year, that'll be it. The rest of the days my own, and it's worked out perfect. I'm not on the go 7 days a week anymore, but I'm still able to keep my foot in the door doing stuff that I enjoy. And it's not as rushed. I mean, when I was working television, we were taking pictures from the game. We were, doing the Greyhound game, and then there would also be maybe a high school football, girls high school basketball, Thunderbirds, Jacobs would be away curling. So besides doing the Greyhound game for that day's newspaper and the Sioux Greyhounds website, you'd have 5 or 6 other things to worry about. This way, I'm retired, do the Greyhound gig. When that's done, I come home, I can watch Sunday night football. Monday night football, you're not stressed. The time's your own. I feel like reading, I read. If I feel like watching, I guess you can see all this stuff behind me.
Oh yeah.
I guess you could tell I like some sports. That's Muhammad Ali on the one side and Julius Erving on the other. And Tony, you'd like this one. See that picture over my head right
Yep.
in the middle?
Yep.
That's the Pontiac Silverdome.
That's the Silverdome. I was gonna say, yeah, that's where I saw my first ever game. Yeah.
Yeah, I had my heart broken a lot of times at the Pontiac Silverdome watching the Lions play. But yeah, so I'm able to do, able to do whatever I want. And sorry, the light went out there.
Oh, that's okay.
So
I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this because there were times I'd be sitting up at the booth, watching a game, and I don't think people fully understand the amount of time and effort you put into sports. You would be running, you'd be taking pictures, you'd be running from, you're right, high school football to girls basketball to volleyball to, there were some days where you would be covering 5 or 6 sports easily not in a day, in half of a day, and then
crazy.
And you would talk about
That's why I'm retired.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So back to the Greyhounds quickly. One thing, obviously you've had the chance to interview a lot of different people and you've had a number of different players. The one guy specifically I wanted to ask you about, and I didn't know if this was something personal or if this was just who he was as a coach, but Dale Hunter from the London Knights. It always seemed like you would always try and get an interview with him, but he would always take off or he'd always, he never really talked to you. Was that a Sioux thing or was that just Dale Hunter as a person and he just
that's just Dale Hunter from what I'm told. You know what? If you catch him in the right mood and he feels like there's something. First of all, he's shy. That's the main reason. He's not a talker. And if they come up here and they lose, man, you better be in that dressing room. You better be outside his dressing room in 40 seconds because he'll get into the dressing room and bang, he's gone. He's either back to the hotel if they're staying the night or he's on the bus and you'd have to go out. I've gone out to their bus sometimes and knocked on the door of the bus to get something from him. But no, if you catch him on the right night that he feels like talking, he can be a really nice guy. Like he'll talk, and it's just Ryan Payette covers them for the London Free Press, guy from the Sioux, really good writer, good reporter. He says the same thing. It's you got to catch him at the right time. Most of the guys, like 95% of the guys in the OHL, the visiting coaches, are really good to deal with. They're professional. Over the years, there have been a few that haven't been. Dave Barr from Guelph was always difficult to deal with. And there was a guy, I'm trying to think who coached Owen Sound 5 or 6 years ago. He was paranoid. He thought we were always trying to get information from him. I said, hey, you know what? I'm just doing my job. He was worried what would go in the newspaper or on the website, whether it would give more information to the other team.
Wow.
I used to say to him, so don't say anything that you don't want, all I'm looking for is a couple of comments. And I think most of the guys that cover the league would agree. The vast majority of coaches in the league are really easy to deal with.
Who was your favorite, or not one guy, but 2 or 3? Who were some of your favorite coaches, Greyhound or not, to deal with throughout the years?
Well, I mean, of the older guys, Teddy Nolan and Craig Hartsburg were always first class. The funny thing is, you get into it with at some point, you'll get into an argument with the coach of the Greyhounds when you're covering them. And you won't get along with them for a couple of weeks, and you can tell they're pissed off at you, and then it goes away. It's happened. It's funny. John Dean and I were loggerheads. I thought he says no, but I thought we were for a while. I mean, I've had that with Sheldon Keefe and with Drew. Joe Patterson, I remember getting into it with him. Dave Cameron was good. I don't think any time with Dave Cameron, but Teddy and Hartsburg, I had a few rows with Hartsburg. But Craig was the type of guy who was so intense, and he had his game face on all the time that, if his team lost and you pointed out some things and you asked him about, you got done the second period, or he'd get angry and you'd get into it with with him and you'd say to him, look, I think what I'm asking is legitimate. And, you know, you go back and forth. And then you'd see him in the hallway a day or two later and he'd be calm again. And he'd say, hey, and you'd say, yeah. I'd go, we okay? I'd say, yeah. Take it personally. If you're a reporter, you can't take it personally because, you know, I can remember getting into it with Drew Bannister. And when Drew left, you know what? He was very complimentary, and I appreciated the things he said to me, that I was fair with them. And it's the same thing with Sheldon. I had a couple. Sheldon didn't like what I'd written about one of their backup goalies, that I couldn't see him being ready to be the number one the next season. Okay. And he called me up and said, "That's a shit comment you made in today's paper." And we got into it, but we got along really well. Like, those guys have played, they're pros, you know, I mean, people don't realize, like, these guys live and breathe as Greyhound coaches, that team, 24 hours. Yeah. Like, do you think they lost 10-4? You were there the other night or the other afternoon when they lost 10-4? I guarantee you John Dean went home and he didn't, you know, he couldn't relax and he had trouble sleeping that night. That's how worked up, you know, like the fans think that they're upset after a game like that. Man, you should see, you know, they try to be professional with us, but you know, they are just pulling their hair out, wondering, you know, what can we do to get a better effort out of the players. They live, I mean, it's not only their life because they love hockey, it's their livelihood. Like, this is how these guys make money, and they get well paid. You know, the coaches in the OHL are making $150,000 a year. Well paid, but it's stressful. I mean, and they're going day after day after day. So I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. I would say that you know, it's hard to say. The vast majority of the Greyhound coaches I've gotten along, I've had arguments with. I've been, you know, told where to go a few times, but I've gotten along really well with them. They've all been very professional, and they understand you're there to do, you know, you're representing the fan. You're asking the same questions the fan would ask.
So what about players? In terms of players, who are some of the players over the years that you've had really good relationships with? And, you know, you talked a little bit about some controversy or getting into it with some coaches. Have you ever had players kind of speak back to you?
Oh, yeah. Years ago, I remember when Teddy was coaching. Or was it? No, I remember. It was Hartsburg was coaching. They brought in this backup goaltender whose brother is actually a longtime NHL veteran. And he was just, he saw me interviewing some guys after the game and asking them, you know, pointed questions. And he just said, you know, hell out of here. Like, why are you bothering this guy? And I'm the type of guy, I just say, hey, you know, I'm doing I would probably curse at the guy and say, hey, leave me alone. I'm doing my job. Don't be, you know, you try not to, but sometimes you get, you know, especially it's hard. I'll be honest. It's hard to take it from a kid. Like, you have a 17-year-old kid. There were a few guys, I got to say, Nick Cousins is in the NHL now. He wasn't an easy guy to deal with. He was a different duck. And I think anybody that had anything to do with the Greyhound organization, that. But the vast majority of the kids, especially today, they've been trained. They've been spoken to by their parents and their agents. They aren't going to do anything stupid with somebody in the media because they know with the internet the way it is now, it's everywhere. Like, and so they're well rehearsed. But you can also tell who the good kids are. And I always had a really good relationship with Morgan Frost. His father was a classic rock disc jockey in Toronto, Andy Frost, and he was the announcer, the arena announcer for the Leafs. Yep. So Morgan liked classic too. Sometimes I'd go in the dressing room and there'd be Pink Floyd on, or there'd be the Eagles, or the Who, the music that I love listening to. And I'd say to the guys, like, who the hell put this on? I'm not. I was used to them going in there and hearing rap or hip hop. Yeah. I said, well, who's got Fleetwood Mac on? Who's got the, you know? And Morgan would say to me, "That's off my playlist, my
Oh.
Spotify list." I'd say, "Morgan, come on, that's beautiful." I said, I never come in this dressing room and hear the Eagles or Don Henley or all this stuff that Morgan liked, the same kind of stuff I had. So I always got along good with him. Plus, he was a good kid, very respectful. The funny thing is, you see as a reporter, these kids basically grow up.
Yeah.
Like when you see them as 16-year-olds and you ask to interview them, they're almost afraid to come and talk to you. Like this guy wants to interview me, and they're yes sir, no sir. They're very polite, and they get a season under their belt, and they get drafted, so they're growing up. I saw and Jacob Holmes. I haven't spoken to him since he got traded, but I saw such a difference this year from actually because it was 2 years. Jacob Holmes was a kid when I remember him in the dressing room. He shows up this year. The guy's got a full beard, and he's filled out. He has the muscles of a man now, and the look of a man, and he's mature, and his voice is deeper, and it's kind of a blast because you see, geez, you see them as and when they're 16. I mean, you coach kids that old, Tony. They're in a lot of ways they're children. Yeah. I mean, these are very skilled children in the Ontario Hockey League. They're the elite, but they're still mentally, in some ways, they're like kids. And you see them by the time they become 19 and 20-year-olds. You basically, over 4 winters and 4 falls, have watched them grow up. It's kind of neat. Like you see, they're more confident in themselves. They're more mature. They stop calling you, they'd stop calling me Mr. Ruicci and call me Peter, because I'd always tell guys, hey, just call me Peter. But the young kids are, oh, hello, Mr. Ruicci. But they become more like your peers as opposed to, and guys I'll talk to now, like Andrew Campbell. When I retired, one of the guys that called me up, he made the Leafs and played for the Kings, and he was a 15th round draft choice. He got drafted into the NHL. He played in the NHL as a 15th round draft choice in the OHL. And they become like peers. Like I had a bunch of guys call me up after I retired just to say hello, and you remember them as kids, and now they're grown men with families. It's weird, it's wild, but it's actually kind of nice.
So the one other question I wanted to ask you about kind of covering the Greyhounds was, and you kind of touched upon it, right? So you're dealing with 16-year-old kids. You're dealing with 17-year-old kids, very vulnerable age. How did you deal with, I don't want to use the word criticizing, but how do you feel like you would be fair to, athletes who aren't getting paid, they're not professional athletes? How do you kind of take that and how can you be an honest reporter, but also keep that in mind and be fair?
Well, you don't overdo it. If a guy makes a turnover in a game, if that was the goal and it was a big game, you can't ignore it. I mean, I've changed over the years too. That when I first started in newspaper, it was harder to use a kid's name by name if you made a bad mistake. But you know what? I've gotten older, and as a reporter, I guess you can't ignore it. But what you do is you talk to the kid after the game and say, hey, if I'd like to ask you about that play, and if he wants to think about what he wants to say about it, if he doesn't want to talk, I've always said to guys, hey, your prerogative. Nobody says you have to talk to me. You can just say no comment. Yeah. But the one thing is, when you do say no comment, I know how it looks to the reader. When you say no comment, it's like you've got something to hide. And most now have been, like I said, they've been coached, and their agents tell them, you know what, be accountable. So you'll ask a guy, and he'll say, yeah, they didn't play very well. And my thing is, they are kids. Just don't overdo it. Like, don't rip a kid to shreds in a story. Like, Besides, it's a story. It's not a column. Like there are reporters who have done that with OHL players and just don't rip a kid to shreds. I could give you one incident where a kid's name did come up that I wrote about, the kid from Sudbury, whose father was the owner.
Oh yeah.
But you probably don't. It's going to take a few minutes. I don't know if you want to go that long with it.
Oh, you can tell the quick story. Absolutely, that's fine. You can tell the story because that was a fact. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. I know who you're talking about. So I think that's important. Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I've never talked about this publicly. Guys from around the Hounds, though. I did a column ripping the owner of the Sudbury Wolves at the time, Burgess, Ken Burgess. And his son, he had his son on the Sudbury Wolves, and his son was not an OHL player. Right. And that bothered me because I know how hard guys work to make the OHL. And he was taking the spot of somebody, I don't know who, somebody who should have made the Sudbury Wolves. The guy had played, at the time when he finally stopped playing, he had played, like, if I remember, 90 OHL games as a forward. He had 2 assists. I've watched him in the preseason. I watched him in the regular season. He couldn't skate to play in the OHL. And my opinion was it was wrong for the league. It's an embarrassment. I had talked to other guys from other teams. They come in, maybe they play in Sudbury before they come to the Sioux. And you sit down with a guy that, you knew from the league. Maybe Bob Bugner was here from Windsor, and I knew him from when he played in the Sioux, and I had a good relation with him. And he might say it, or I might say it, about what's going on with Burgess and his kid. Burgess thought his son was a highly skilled OHL player. I don't know where he got that from, but it's a bad look for the league when there's that kind of nepotism. You saw the same thing in Flint. With the owner from Flint, who's just been reinstated, and his son. So anyway, I'd written a column saying, it's this team is struggling like crazy. How do you run a team when the owner is basically foisted his son on the coach? And so when I got, but I tried not to be overly critical of the kid. All I said was the kid wasn't a bona fide OHLer. He was a nice kid, everything I heard, very good student, but to make the point, you had to bring it up. And there's a whole secondary part to this story, but that's one of the few times that I think I really, a kid's name was in a column and he didn't look good. The reason why I wrote it was because I felt that the coach, or not the coach, the owner, Burgess, he needed to be criticized, and nobody in Sudbury was doing it. The newspaper guys in Sudbury weren't doing it, and they had played here a few times. I said, this is ridiculous. The OHL is the best feeder league, I think, of professional hockey, and I thought it was just to the OHL for this guy to have his son playing. And so, unfortunately, the kid's name got in the story. It had to, but the main person I thought deserved criticism, and I criticized, was the father.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because he actually got one of his assists against the Greyhounds.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
I remember that. But to your point, I worked the visitor penalty box, and, I would often, I get to chat with the players and stuff. And, the Sudbury guys, anytime it was brought up, they were all very respectful and polite to the player. They thought he was a good kid. Nobody blamed the player for this. But to your point, they all kind of rolled their eyes and do what you got to do, right?
Yeah. What was he doing on the team? There was a good kid. I remember reading, somebody had put a comment on a story that was in the Sudbury Star. The last kid who got cut was actually, everybody thought was a good player. And he was a winger too. And you know what? By Burgess putting his son, owning the team, and you see it in hockey all the time, in the minor, in the junior leagues and in midget, somebody's got some pull, their kid makes the team. But in the OHL, I just thought that should not happen. And then it opened a whole can of worms. I got into it with their coach, Fixter.
Yeah.
That was the TSN thing you're talking about. Fixter was going to stand up for his owner.
Yeah.
So he went at me, and I went at him, and
the rest is history.
That was embarrassing for all involved. Let me tell you.
It happens. Listen, Peter, we've had you on for over an hour, and honestly, Peter, I could talk to you again for another hour. I would love to.
Fun, I'll tell you.
I would love to have you back on because I didn't even get a chance to talk to you about, high school sports and some of your favorite teams throughout the years and those types of things. But you know what? I really think that you don't fully understand the role that you had and the importance that you had in so many young people's lives throughout the years. And I really think that's important for you to hear because
thank you.
I still have my articles. I have every newspaper article you ever wrote about me laminated. My dad did that for me. And they're laminated sitting at my house. And I go through them every so often. Honestly, I love them. And I think there's a lot of other people that have that. And again, it's not just high school athletes, but it also goes to professionals. And you've always been the consummate professional. And I really appreciate the work and the time and the effort that you put in here in Sault Ste. Marie. And I think so many other people feel the same way.
Thank you very much. And I'd say to Jimmy, I don't know if Jim's still there.
No, he had to run out.
Yeah. Jimmy and the guys who coach made our jobs easier and very easy because they were always candid. The guys and women who coached girls basketball or volleyball or high school football, Sabercats, Steelers, coaches made our job easy because they were accessible and candid, and the kids too. I don't think I ever had a kid that I tried to interview for whether they're playing high school sports or whether they were, an elite track and field athlete that was going somewhere or, curls. The people in the Sioux have been great. That's the thing about this city, that for a city that isn't huge, 75, 80,000 people, how many outstanding athletes the city's produced, and how many knowledgeable coaches. Like, people take their sports so seriously here. All you've coached, you put in so much work to get better and better at what you do. Makes the kids better, makes the leagues better, makes the teams better, makes the job of the media easier. So it wasn't just media doing things. The coaches and the kids with their the candid comments for stories and with their making themselves available, it made our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, again, Peter, I'd love to have you back on. If we can arrange this again, I would love to talk to you.
I know you had other questions. I should have warned you. You get me on some topics, I'd be babbling.
I love it. So that's great. We'll definitely have you back on. And again, I thank you because I'm kind of new to this too, right? And I'm certainly not a professional. I'm doing this for fun. I've had the opportunity to now interview a few Greyhounds and a few professional athletes. And I do go back and kind of see what you have done. And I've been trying to learn that way too. So I really appreciate, you as a person and the dedication that you have given to this city. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it, Tony. I'm overwhelmed with. I've had other people say that to me. Bill Paul, who coached at Boating, and son called me after I retired, and he was very, very nice. And it makes your day when people feel that way. And believe me, it's very much appreciated.
Awesome. So on behalf of Sault Sports, again, I'm Tony Boniferro. Jim Monico signed off. Jay Houselander in studio. And thank you so much for doing this, Peter, and look forward to talking again soon.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.